Welcome to the SSI Orbit podcast, a forum where we explore the ever-growing ecosystems of self-sovereign identity. And I'm your host, Mathieu Glaude. In today's podcast episode, I speak to Heather Dahl, CEO of Indicio Tech. Indicio is a public benefit corporation that's focused on unlocking societal benefits of SSI and verifiable credentials by doing consulting, training, technology support, tech development, and much more. In this conversation, we cover Heather's background and her transition into Sovereign as Sovereign CEO and then later on into Indicio Tech. We talk about Indicio's mission and services. We talk about the advantages of Indicio becoming a public benefits corporation. I talked to Heather about the importance of usability, accessibility, and other things that are really needed to be put in place for self-sovereign identity to have real social impacts. We also talk about Heather's experience of working alongside startups and enterprises deploying SSI solutions. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Heather Dahl. Hi, Heather. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So Heather, I've been looking forward to this conversation, just reading up a bit on you online of some of the experiences you've had. The one that kind of stuck with me was the book that you co-authored, children's book series that teaches kids all about cybersecurity. And I find that quite interesting. Being able to really break down a topic like that and really explain it to kids is, I think, something that in the decentralized identity industry that we're in is something that maybe we could work on a little better. So do you mind just talking to me about yourself and your experience?
Well, I think our book series is called The Cynja, CYNJA, which stands for Cyber Ninjas. You know, the world has a lot of ninjas out there, especially when you're 9 or 10 years old. But being a cyber ninja, now that is a special kind of ninja, special expertise that is trained and learned over time. And that really developed, and it actually was around the time I got into decentralized identity. We realized a number of things. Chase Cunningham and I, who co-authored the books, along with Shiro DeRosso, who's an amazing artist, we realized that kids didn't fully understand the dangers that were lurking in cyberspace. And when you looked at a lot of the cyber education materials, like it had spaceships and fuzzy bunnies, neither of which we think live in cyberspace exactly. So there's nothing really out there that was capturing the interest of especially a certain nephew of mine. And so that's actually what started this book. Was I went to work, I was developing threat intelligence solutions with Chase Cunningham and said, I have a project for us. Let's write a children's book about cybersecurity that's really awesome and cool, that would inspire a kid like my nephew at the time who didn't think bad guys lived in cyberspace. And instead of wanting to be a cyber warrior, he was more interested in slaying dragons, which I tried to explain to him. The job opportunities there are pretty limited, but job opportunities slaying botnets and worms, now we're talking. And so that's how we developed the Cynja book series, as you talk about decentralized identity is really the next frontier of trying to explain this not only to kids, but adults, business executives, lawyers, accountants. This is something where we have to develop the story for multiple audiences, multiple personas, and explain it. So on one hand, I guess you know what my next children's book topic is. On the other hand, that's what we're committed to at Indicio as well.
That's amazing. I love being able to, it really takes a special talent being able to really go down to the right principles and the right basics to be able to explain it to any type of audience. And I mentioned earlier, I think, again, that's something that is quite needed in SSI or in decentralized identity.
And you can't underestimate the importance of visuals in not only conveying complex topics, but also in catching interest where someone wants to spend the time to actually learn. And with the children's book series, where, since we're talking on a podcast, it's visually astounding to see the images. And Shiro, the artist that we worked with, he himself is an engineer, a software engineer, who happens to be an amazing graphic artist who worked with. So he understood the concepts, and we all got on the same page of what this world could look like. Now let's visualize it. So we need to go through the same activity here in self-sovereign decentralized identity and explain how this world works for multiple learners, whether that's someone that wants to read, whether that's a visual learner, whether that's someone like this podcast and wants to listen while driving in the car. We have to make sure that those of us who are developing and working in this space convey that information in multiple ways through various channels.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so then I guess you moved into decentralized identity sometime after that. So you were the CEO of Sovereign. For those who don't know Sovereign, Sovereign is a decentralized network that serves as a public identity utility for a lot of decentralized identity projects. So Heather, you were the CEO of Sovereign. Do you mind just talking about how you got into that space and just about your experiences with Sovereign?
Yes, to talk about how I got to the place at Sovereign, we have to go back actually a few years, because there were a lot of people who spent so many hours and years of work to get to the point of where Sovereign was. And so I became involved in what is now known as self-sovereign identity. At the time, I'm not quite sure what it was exactly called. It was around 2011, so about 10 years ago. I was working with the company New Star, and we were doing some initial research and development around what became the Respect Network at the time. I was involved in the Respect Network. We had done some research with Drummond Reed, who helped create that network. And I actually was very, and still am, very focused on children's safety, data privacy around children. And so when I left New Star to focus on my Senja books, I also was getting asked by parents right and left, how do I protect my kids online? So Chase and I developed, at the time, what was the first commercial application on the Respect Network called Senja Space, which allowed parents to actually control and manage how their children's data was stored when they were using, when they were online, when they were on their iPad. And so that's how I became involved with what evolved to be Sovereign, and served on the board of directors of Sovereign. And so Sovereign continued to mature. Eventually, I moved into the role of CEO of the Sovereign Foundation.
Great. And how did Sovereign evolve? Like, Sovereign's obviously still running today. Like, I think if you go to Sovereign's website, there's tons of different organizations that are associated in one way or another to Sovereign and that use Sovereign. It seems to be one of the most popular implementations today in that decentralized self-sovereign stack. How has Sovereign kind of evolved today from when you got into it, and then maybe just using that to start talking about Indicio of kind of what got you into that and what's really the big differences between Indicio and where Sovereign is?
So Sovereign is a success story of a tremendous community effort. And when I say community, we're talking people from all over the world, various companies, across industries, sizes, also just different solutions and visions for where they want self-sovereign identity to go. And so when we look at Sovereign, that's what you have to, someone who's new to this has to understand. Sovereign's not one person or one particular effort. Sovereign is a collection of the world's belief behind an individual having the ability to manage, control their own digital identity. And so what we saw, and what I saw at Sovereign, is that our goal is for adoption of decentralized identity or some called self-sovereign identity, to move away from the centralized database where a company gives you an identity and you're locked into that database and you can't really prove something about yourself without someone looking into their database, just to get away from that. And so where we were at Sovereign is we saw the challenges that organizations had, because while the vision is something that we all believe in and we want to achieve, remember, it takes a lot of steps to get there. And so we saw some of the challenges, the blockers, the learning curves, the frustrations at Sovereign. And so where we are with the team that came together at Indicio is, we like to call our motto is no blockers too big or too strong. Our goal is simply at Indicio is to simply accelerate the creation and adoption and the widespread use of verifiable identity credentials so that people have control over their digital identities and then how they share their personal information in a way that's secure and protects their privacy. And our mission is to do that by helping any organization that is trying to achieve that with their digital identity. And they've come into a challenge, a blocker. They don't understand something. Another way I like to think of it is kind of like a homework helpline, right? Not sure where to go, decentralized identity, bring your question to us. And so what Indicio does is we're really trying to make verifiable credentials easy to adopt, easy to use across all stages of the decentralized identity journey. And we realized in order to make that happen, this is just not a technical challenge. And Indicio does offer technical help. We have a team of engineers and architects that can help you work through any kind of blocker, or maybe you're trying to figure out architecture, or you're trying to figure out how to build a decentralized identity solution. We got you. We're there. If it's trying to implement into a proprietary solution, we'll help you do that. We're basically, whatever it's going to take to help get you from a technical point of view, adopting decentralized identity, we are going to be there side by side, helping your team do that. But what we found is that a lot of organizations need training. And so we offer instructor-led training programming from what's verifiable credential all the way to how to set up your own indie. We customize those trainings, or we have modules that we have used with various clients, because if you don't teach how decentralized identity works, and if you can't get everyone on your team or your partners that you work with on the same page, it's going to be really challenging to move forward, simply speaking with a common language. So Indicio offers training. Another blocker is, what's the business strategy behind this? Either what's the strategy of the solution I'm trying to build? What's the strategy of my company and how it's aligning to this new decentralized world? How do I explain the benefits of decentralized identity to my internal executive sponsors? So we work on business strategy. Then, as we talked about earlier, is you've got to go out and explain this. And we offer a marketing professional services around marketing. So we help organizations do slide decks, crafting their compelling stories. We help with technical writing. We help with writing press releases. We help with writing white papers. We help social media strategies. So anything that can help explain what decentralized identity is out to the market. We have an awesome marketing team, writers, editors, social media, digital marketers ready and work with clients on that front. And then lastly, we have a practice just solely focused on decentralized identity governance. There are multiple efforts. Sovereign has governance framework years in development. You have the trust over IP efforts. You have governance efforts coming through other organizations. We have a governance team that helps organizations understand, review different governance documents. Some organizations want to write their own governance. We help with that. So really, I mean, that kind of explains the whole offering of what Indicio does, but it all boils down to bring your blocker. And one of these 5 areas I talked about is probably going to be able to help you move through that blocker and continue down the path of adoption of decentralized identity and its success.
That's great. And I think people just underestimate the strategy and thinking that needs to go behind implementing a successful decentralized identity or decentralized anything strategy for that effect. We've been dealing with this for years now, just in the blockchain and crypto and just decentralized technology space, where the minute you want to take advantage of trusted data and transparency and credentialing solutions within kind of a broader ecosystem altogether, I think in reality, your business model is likely to change. You need to evaluate where you fit in this new ecosystem. Yes. So it's really great that you take that kind of wider range approach of different services you offer, because it's not just one thing, like providing a blockchain, for example, or providing just a use case. It's just, there's so much that goes into just properly defining a strategy altogether. And we're dealing with something too, where you mentioned the governance side of things, which is quite interesting. That we're in conversations in the trust over IP, for example, on that stuff. There's a lot of work happening there. I'd be quite interested to get your take, and I guess based on the experience of Indicio working with different clients so far, like how does people underestimate the need for governance and how early you need to start talking about it? Is that something that you would agree with?
Yes, and sometimes with the governance, it can be overwhelming if you're new to this space. And in order to have adoption, you need to have a lot of people who are new to this space become involved. Our focus is not to make it daunting. What do we mean by governance? Let's go through a governance framework. Let's walk through the different components. Let's talk about what's needed. How does this apply to what we call machine readable governance? So it's nice to have a legal document, but how does that apply to the actual code and operation of your agents, of your network? And so we try to talk about governance from the very first step in building your systems and understanding the roles of governance involved. And sometimes the existing governance that we've adopted in our community over time, it's not a one size fits all right now. And so sometimes we have to walk through what are the particular unique parts of a use case or regulatory demands, and how can we look through the governance best practices that we have thus far and evolve those to the next step. And then how do you implement that, and how do you explain that to the partners, so then you can see how we go back over the marketing? How do you explain the governance on up to your boss? How do you explain governance where it becomes something that helps accelerate adoption instead of slowing it down? And that's one of the challenges for those who are already in the space. Governance has actually slowed their adoption. And so what can we do to help explain the role of governance, maybe to legal teams or to a general counsel? So when they're going through their own internal reviews, they can actually go through the review a little bit quicker, and also work with the counsel to talk about what their concerns are and how it applies to the frameworks that they're looking at.
One of the quite interesting things that I like seeing coming out of Indicio, and seeing this within this Utility Foundry working group that I'm a part of in the Trust over IP, is this Indicio network, like this testnet. So this is another piece to the puzzle in the whole stack, and this is probably a piece that Indicio has identified as being kind of a barrier to entry or friction. We're seeing some more partnership announcements that are happening. with Indicio, such as like Trinsic and Global ID. Are people looking for like a fully managed blockchain-based utility network? Is that the purpose of this Indicio testnet? And what's the future of this network look like for you?
Right, and ID Ramp has made an announcement, and ID Union Listy Wallet has made an announcement. Actually, the origins of it were we had clients who are very much focused on interoperability. In order to do interoperability of networks, well, you need at least 2 networks to do that development to. So it really started out as a laboratory experiment network that clients could use to develop solutions that you could issue a credential on one network and read it from another. And that's what was fascinating, is innovation created the test network, because we had clients really wanting to push forward on interoperability, which is crucial to success. And so that's where the Indicio testnet started. When you're focused on innovation, having someone there to call and help with your blockers, for instance, is an important part of that. And having another brain in which to bounce ideas off of. And so by offering a professional staff supporting that network, it allows for clients to innovate and move faster because they've got that extra resource there ready to go and with them in the same direction. And we also have someone, that's committed to their success.
Do your customers or people you're working with, and we talk a lot about this too, about just in order for this to be widely adopted, you need these solutions to be accessible, you need these solutions to be inclusive, they need to be usable. And I know Indicio was part of the Department of Homeland Security Design Challenge. Just design overall, basically back to your story of being able to explain stuff to kids. It's the same type of thing. You need to be able to explain it the same type of way, just depending on the user you're trying to get it across to. How do you look at design, and what do you think are the biggest contributions people could do in that space to help the whole industry?
So it's interesting when you talk about inclusion, and I'll even go to the testnet, as we could have stood the testnet up and said, oh, only certain organizations get to innovate on interoperability between networks. But we made sure the first thing we did was we opened it up for anyone who wanted to use the testnet to use the testnet. And so that's something where you can go to the Indicio website, and there are instructions on how you can use the testnet right now. And that's part of the story here, is inclusion, is making sure that when we do something, that we contribute it back to the community. The testnet being one of those. The next one would be the Department of Homeland Security Digital Wallet Challenge. What was interesting about that, Indicio does not have a digital wallet. We are not a proprietary product shop. But what we do have is a tremendous amount of insight, having worked with a variety of clients, variety of industries around the world. Also, we have a team where some of our team was new to this space. So they brought brand new ideas. We have a team in Indicio that's multi-generational. So we have a team and a robust intern program. So we're getting points of view from digital natives, even I would say the generation before digital natives, involved all the way through people that, Gen X, baby boomers, etc. So you have Indicio, you have representation from every generation on our team. And what that brings is a fascinating point of view. So we saw this digital wallet challenge, and we decided to make it, we would put together an entry as a challenge for ourselves. This was going to be our team project together to push ourselves to the next level. And so we put together our submission. We thought everyone on our team contributed, but we had a core group who led the effort. We put together the submission. It was very much based on relationships that you have in the digital world. And lo and behold, we were selected as a finalist. But I think what that shows is that a lot of times we get caught in engineering driving the effort, and engineering, and to save budget or whatever the reasons are, they're driving the design. But in order for decentralized identity to succeed and ultimately be adopted at the consumer level, you have to have representation and inclusivity among all different types of experiences, jobs, ages, backgrounds, geographies, and develop your wallet from that point of view. And so that's what I think was so incredible about the DHS Digital Wallet Challenge is I'm sure the DHS could have put the prize money towards developing all different kinds of code for a wallet, but they put it behind UI UX. And I think that is a very important signal towards the future of what we as a industry need to be focused on, and that is ultimately those who will use the wallet. And so once again, at Indicio, we want to contribute and help drive the adoption of decentralized identity. And once this wallet challenge wraps up, we will be open sourcing our final design and all the components for anyone to use that if that will help their project succeed.
That's fantastic. For these mass adoption consumer like critical applications like that, it's incredibly important to take all these things into consideration and really build a strong foundation of knowledge by doing tests and taking different representations of people in your design decisions up front before even thinking about technology or thinking about implementation. Because if you don't have this in place, what you're trying to do is just not going to work if you're talking about public sector issuance of credentials or just general societal kind of use of decentralized identity.
Well, and I think we actually announced 2 days ago Aries Bifold, which is a project that Indicio is helping the community lead to get to a full mobile agent, and Indicio made the initial code contribution to that mobile agent. Part of that contribution was the first UI UX that we developed as part of this DHS digital wallet competition. So that was our first contribution on the UI UX. Our next contribution will be our final entry. There are different ways of thinking and points of view, and our hope is whether an organization uses the UI UX that we put out there or not, if it provides inspiration to help gain traction or to help them get over a hurdle that they have or to think a little differently and it succeeds, that's what our hope is with these contributions that we're making back to the community, is to help everyone move forward together.
I love it. And I love that the close community that we work with, even the public sector, seems to be all about this openness and open contributions and providing transparency into what's happening. Like, I really love that whole movement that we're seeing where, again, what we're doing is all about transparency. It's all about bringing like high levels of assurance and high security and really being able to provide control for people to manage their own credentials in their lives. So it's just taking like this broad ecosystem and everyone putting the contributions together is how this is going to keep advancing. And I guess some of the decisions that Indicio made just on the corporate level, just looking at all of this more of like, hey, we want to really make social impact with this technology. We don't necessarily want to be tied down to some of the traditional pressures of shareholders or investors or whoever's involved in the company. This led Indicio to really rethink the corporate structure. Do you mind talking a bit about that? I think that's quite interesting, the decision that you took there to steer the ship that way.
Yes. In December, we incorporated it as a public benefit corporation. It's offered in just over 30 states in the US. A public benefit corporation is an organization that balances their overall goals along with shareholder returns. So the decisions are driven, are you meeting the overall public benefit goals and that you're also, returning to the shareholders that are involved. But they go hand in hand. So we're not saying, oh, we're not going to pay our bills or we're not going to have a strong financial performance, but we're going to do that while embracing the goals and vision that our company was founded upon. And so we're going to use the two together as North Star for our future. And why did we do that? It wasn't something we did overnight. And DCO was founded in right after the pandemic began. And we thought about it for a number of months. We did analysis, we discussed it. We had our own internal meeting with our team. We discussed it with others. I mean, this was something that we took our time and were very thoughtful. And ultimately, in December, we reincorporated the public benefit corporation because in DCO, every single person on our team, from our interns through our tech team, our marketing team, our governance team, myself, we all believe wholeheartedly that decentralized identity is going to have a transformative impact on society. Just as we believe we have a right to control our identities and our privacy offline, we also have the right to control our identities. We see verifiable digital credentials as something that enables everyone to have a permanent, portable digital identity and to have control and consent. Very important part, consent over who they share their personal data with. And so we really wanted to recognize at the DNA level of our company, the decentralized identity is the foundation for this transformational change. And so we committed ourselves to building a successful and sustainable business based upon this commitment to the value of decentralized identity, because we think that's the most effective and accountable way to bring decentralized identity into existence. And so what we have done is we've set out a charter that explains our mission, our values, our principles, and the commitments that we've made to pursuing them. And so at the end of every year, we're not only looking for financial performance, which is very important to us, but also equally important to us is our performance against our mission. And we believe together that is going to lead to growth, success, and ultimately the advancement of decentralized identity, which will benefit everyone.
I love what you said about the consent. Like, I think really that is key in everything we're doing here is you want to empower people to have a consent-driven life with what they're doing. Like, it's all
Right.
about consent. And I love the public benefit corporation direction. For some who don't know, there's well-known companies like Patagonia, for example, who is a public benefit corporation. I think in a lot of these really disruptive spaces that have so much benefit for people of this planet, like you could think about green energy companies and other industries like that, like being able to take that structure just realigns the incentives a little bit so that you could really not lose your mission and why you started doing this.
And it's important that not only is the technology that we're working on, right, reflecting our mission, also how we operate as a company reflects our values and our mission. So we've made commitments and to our own employees. We've made commitments into how we operate as a company. We've made commitments on our approach to sustainability in the environment. We have made commitments to inclusion, not only inside our own company, but also to how we can help the community and those who may not have access to the technical trainings, or they're at nonprofits who don't have the large budgets. So we make sure that we can do everything we possibly can for inclusion at every step of the way, not only within our own company, but also for the clients that we serve and the community that we're a part of in decentralized identity, and then the community that we live in every day.
I want to take a couple points from here. That's just as my segue here. I'm going to try to combine two things together. Is that you mentioned sustainability and the environment, and then you mentioned the incentives in here. I think like in the space that we're in, if we're dealing with distributed ledger technology or blockchains, it always gets associated to the conversation of crypto and Bitcoin and energy consumption and mining and stuff like that. And I did find it quite comical. It is quite comical sometimes, some of the things that we need to explain in FAQs and stuff like that. Like, no, we're not we're not burning energy by mining and by running our technology here. But one of the things that crypto really does well is it has, at least the proper crypto, is they have really good incentive design or incentive mechanisms in place, and they often use their native tokens inside of that network. Is this concept of using a native token or a digital token or digital currency something that you have thought about as something that could maybe help fuel and help grow a decentralized public identity utility?
What we spend a lot of time thinking about is, what is the emerging economy of decentralized identity? So I take it up more than a token. What is this emerging economy that's being created? I think a token in network can be one portion of it. There are other ways to look at networks and how they can be monetized. And that's something that we work with clients and the community on, is what is the best economy for decentralized identity? Because I think today we don't have 110% solid answer to give, but let's explore all the different ways that you can exchange value through decentralized identity, starting with the question of, do you want to exchange value through decentralized identity? Do you need to exchange value? What does exchanging value mean to you? What does exchanging value mean to your organization, your industry, the ecosystem or collaboration that you're a part of? What is important to come out of that value? So we work through a whole litany of questions to understand, and then looking at, once we understand what value means in that particular use case or system and industry is developing, now how do you apply that to the technology? Is it at a network level? Is it at an agent level? Is it part of a membership program? So a token could be one of those answers. And then a token, if that is one of those answers, what does that token do, mean, etc.? But I don't think, the token is the one thing that's going to do it all if you don't have a clear answer on what value is to begin with in your particular use case.
For a node operator, for example, let's say we say, hey, like we really want to build this solid and sustainable network that could really support the growth of this new paradigm that we're pushing forward. Are tokens or some form of payments for node operators something that you think about? Like, forget about just the end users, but just the sustainability of the network, so we don't find ourselves in a space where people are potentially leaving the network because there's not necessarily a good enough business model to be a node operator, and we kind of avoid all of the nodes becoming kind of centrally stored in some big cloud solution. Is this something that makes sense just from like a node operator perspective, to have some sort of token economy?
Yeah, and it goes down to what is the value for the node operator? What kind of value are they looking to get out of it? And it may not actually be tokens, or it may be tokens. And this was actually an interesting conversation I had 2 days ago with the CEO of another company. Is we were talking about precisely this. what is the benefit a node operator wants? And his first answer is, look, I'm just trying to develop a solution here. And, you know, I'm happy being node steward, whatever you want to call that particular role, because I get so much out of the community and it helps me build my solution. But I see my future as my solution in how I'm solving problems. I don't see my business hinging on how much monetization I get out of running a node. And so that was a very interesting conversation. It's almost in one way, when I was trying to have this exact conversation with him, he was saying me cart before the horse. I want to go out and prove that this technology works, it's successful, and we can build a viable business on it. And once I feel confident about that, then I'm going to worry about time, energy, and being compensated for being a node operator or a steward. But right now, the cost that I spend operating that node is so small compared to the cost I am putting into building my solution. So he just did not see that. And after that conversation, I can appreciate that. And I do think our focus, once again, is getting the traction on decentralized identity actually being used. And we will find value to deliver to those who operate the nodes on the network to make sure that we continue to have that distributed environment. And I feel confident that it can be done and value can be given to those node operators. We just don't know what the best value is at this point.
Right. I guess it at least from our perspective with the clients we're doing deployments with of this stuff too, like the really the toughest thing, or I guess the biggest barrier is really like the ecosystem design, like who's doing what, who's benefiting from what, who needs to do what, who needs to be in this ecosystem, and just better understanding how value creation happens within a specific ecosystem. And we're seeing both sides, right? You have, just like we saw and we still see in the kind of blockchain and just overall decentralized technology space, is that some people are coming at this from the perspective of a startup or an entrepreneur, and they're looking to build an ecosystem solution, where it be like a marketplace or what. And then on the other side, you have the large enterprise or the public sector agency that is looking to explore and deploy this stuff as well. Do you see, like, as a company that's really focused on removing blockers for your customers and for the industry, do you see the same blockers being present on both sides, one on with the startups and the other one on kind of the large enterprise public sector side?
What we see is, I'll call it the boil the ocean blocker, where an organization has gotten so far down the road going, well, will we have enough node operators to operate the network? When we still haven't even proven that the slides that you have built can actually work and benefit your clients. And so when it comes to actually running a network, that's something that can be solved. But let's first start with the simple. And so we are always focused on the simpler the system you make, the more likely you are to be successful. So focus on taking the steps, achieving them, and things build upon each other. So on the network decision, that's something where go to a network, roll your own network, or whatever it takes just to get things stood up and working. And then you can start figuring out what the right network environment should be and what the right compensation in a network should be for your particular use case. But we are very focused on simple deployments of decentralized identity. What do I mean by a simple deployment decentralized identity? Focusing on the relationship between a credential issuer, the credential verifier, and the credential holder. Because once those participants are determined, Then you can start deploying what we call, closed ecosystem, but make sure that that use case works. Then move it over to the ecosystem. And that simple use case actually may be inside your own company. You don't even need an outside partner to deploy a closed ecosystem to prove out the value of decentralized identity. A lot of, especially global enterprises, probably have use cases inside their own organization. They can use decentralized identity, and then they're not wrapped up in a larger conversation about monetization of networks when they can focus on the success inside. And then that automatically starts opening up success inside, opens up success with partners. Success with partners opens up success with collaboration and consortium. Consortium it keeps growing and growing, and then you can start focusing on the larger ecosystem issues. But what we found is that organizations, if they're not focused on a simple solution, they can lose years to discussion and slide deck presentations. And years is not something the bosses like to see. They like to see traction and deliverables and building on a stepwise approach.
I think I'm starting to see a trend with your thinking of keeping it simple, of with self-sovereign identity, with explaining cybersecurity to children. If you're able to keep it simple, and often it's the simple
Right.
stuff that allows you to make the most progress, because a lot of the pieces are ready, right? It's just being able to test it out, try it out, make it easy. Are there any exciting use cases that you see, or low-hanging fruits? Like what's the most exciting things you're seeing today?
So the first thing, I'll talk about the structure that we're seeing, that these exciting things have, what these exciting things I talk about, well, how did they even start? And in reality, the exciting things started because of the three-legged stool. One is that they had one part of their early POC or pilot focused on the technical solution, the credential issuer, verifier holder, that they had the ability to write cryptographic messages to a digital ledger and retrieve them. Okay, so you have the team that was able to do the technical success. Then you had, working together, another group who's focused on the business of that solution. What problem is it solving? Who are the issuers? How do we explain this? How do we create, presentations? How do we create blogs? How do we write about it? How can we go get it funded? How can we get an executive sponsor? How can we get a pilot working with actual users that are not people working at the company? So that's another piece. And then the third group or portion of this leg of the stool is around the governance, right? Even on a simple use case, it still needs governance, even if the governance is one line. So the focus of the governance is, how do users get and use credentials? How does this deployment comply with the ever-expanding global regulations on data stewardship? So when you have the technology, the business, and the governance working together on a very simple use case, then you apply it to the really exciting stuff I think that people are constantly looking at. And when you're constantly, I often say, when you talk about the cool use cases, you often overlook the arduous effort it took to get to cool, because cool doesn't happen overnight. So when we talk to use cases, our COVID world, there's no need to explain that we're in a situation where you have data from one industry, in this case healthcare, trying to convey authoritative data around a health status to another industry that had no vision that they would ever need to interact with the healthcare system, whether that's something as simple as attending an event or going to school or doing anything back that we used to do just over a year ago. So we're seeing a lot of use cases around getting back to pre-COVID life however we can create that. We're also seeing some really cool early use cases coming out of IoT. We often talk about decentralized identity and think about humans, but there are a lot of devices out there who, one, are connected to humans, or two, need to communicate device to device. And so that's something that hasn't primarily been a focus in the decentralized community, but I think it's starting to gain traction, and we'll start seeing some really interesting things there. And then lastly, fintech. In the banking world, I think we all see the importance of authoritative data that can be used to speed transactions along. Now, in a world where people don't want to go to offices, they don't want to carry paper in, and the reliance on digital records is more important than ever. Having the validity of those records built into the system is becoming more important. And so we see use cases coming out of the banking industry around that.
Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. To stay up to speed with future episode releases, please subscribe to the podcast on whatever channel you're listening to it right now. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me directly. You can find me online. I'm quite active on LinkedIn and Twitter, so I look forward to hearing from you. See you all next time.